Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so if we just start the slides, if that's all right, Mrs. Robertshaw. I'm not sure if you've had a chance to look at these two questions. These are a website that we use, which is very similar to sort of stats paper, StatSal questions. So we do show these to the children regularly so that we're preparing them even in year 3 and year 4 for the year 6 stats. And I know that we'll talk about later in the meeting just how much content of the year 6 stats does come from the year 3 and year 4 curriculum. So this is just to give you a little idea of what kind of layout the questions look like. But like I say, you can have a go at those in your own time. We'll put this meeting on the website as well, so you can refer back to it. So I'll just start off by giving you a brief overview of what we look at in school. So we talk about something called mastery in maths. And I'll let you have a little read of that for yourself, and then I'll just explain what that actually means in terms of how that looks at St Mary's. So the idea for mastery is that the maths that they're learning becomes embedded. So that deep, long-term and secure knowledge of and understanding of the subject means, you know, they're not just seeing things once, they're seeing it, especially in Key Stage 2, they're exposed to it in year 3, year 4, and then year 5 and year 6, so that they have got that deepened level of understanding. And how that looks, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail through the White Rose scheme that we use, is that children have plenty of exposure to the same types of aspects of maths. So, for example, the 4 operations, fractions, decimals, and giving everybody the chance to succeed. And I think, like I say, the White Rose maths that we use is really inclusive for that, and it does help all children, or most children, succeed to the best that they can with that. If we just move on to the next slide as well, it's kind of just highlighted a bit more there. That's all right. So it says here, you know, mathematics is something for all pupils, so all pupils can achieve. And the way that that is shown as well through the different types of methods used when we are teaching maths, it means that there's different ways of learning and acquiring that knowledge for different children, which I know Mrs. Robertshaw will go into in a bit more detail over the next few slides. So like it says there, the mastery approach can enable all pupils, and there's only a tiny proportion of exceptions within that to succeed in maths. If you want to move on, Mrs. Robertshaw.
Okay, thank you. So Mrs. Ray keeps talking about the word mastery, so I just wanted to talk to you a bit more about what that actually looks like in a lesson and why we take that approach as well, and what the advantages of it are. So one of the big advantages is that the whole class are moving through at the same pace. This means that no one's able to rush ahead, no one is able to be left behind. We're all moving at the same pace, and we're all embedding as much as possible. So rather than some of those children that they always are very quick to finish the task, they're confident, and it's just making sure that those children have the opportunity to really deepen and embed that knowledge that they've gained. And at the same time, the children who need a little bit more time are able to get that bit more time as well. And then this means that we can guarantee that the children all have a secure understanding of the mathematical concepts before we then move on to the next topic. By using a mastery approach, it gives the children time to think really deeply about the maths that we're doing. So really understand concepts at a rational level, and really understanding how they can use that concept most confidently and most efficiently as well. By going at a bit slower pace, it leads to greater progress because the children are really secure in their understanding, and it means then that we don't have to go back and revisit topics quite as much because they have really secured that understanding. The mastery approach also helps the children to become much more confident in their own learning, especially those children. I'm sure that there's many of them out there that we've got that I can't do maths, I'm no good at maths. It's quite a common opinion to have, and I think part of that is down to the amount of content that we often feel that we have to get through. Yet by doing a mastery approach, it really means that we can build that confidence in the children. We can take the time to really ensure that they are confident before we move on. Because if we keep moving on and moving on and moving on when the children aren't ready, that is going to instill that I'm no good at maths, I can't do maths. Whereas if we go slow and only move on when they're ready, that builds the confidence for the children. And then finally, it's great for you might be sat there thinking, well, how do you differentiate? You know, we've got some children that are really confident, some children that need a bit more time, some children that need more support. How are we able to do that when we're doing a mastery approach and all moving through at the same pace? But actually, we can differentiate through that in several different ways. So, for example, in a typical lesson, which I know Mrs. Ray is going to go through in a moment with you, we are all going through the same content, but we do go through a series of different types of activities, which you can see at the bottom there. So the children start off with the fluency tasks so that they are just completing that, let's say, calculation, that method, and they're really practicing and getting to grips with being confident with the thing that you are doing that day. And then they move on to the reasoning and problem solving questions. And this means that the children who need more time can spend more time on fluency, and the children who are quite quick to complete the work and are quite confident can move on to the more challenging reasoning and problem solving questions. One thing that we've been working on a lot in school at the moment is how do we make sure that the children who need more time also get the opportunity at reasoning and problem solving. And that's something we've been building into lessons recently, is that sometimes we do just move the children on, but when we can see that they are fairly fluent, that they are starting to increase in confidence, we can just move the children on the sheet and say, right, it's time for a reasoning question. So it means that we get to make that decision as to what pace the children work at when we can see their understanding and their confidence. We're also able to offer support for the children who need it through kind of concrete materials, so base 10, Unicorn, multi-link, counters, place value counters. We have all of those resources readily available in the classrooms to support any of the children who need that little extra helping hand, and we teach the children how to use them. But at the same time, we also have in every classroom a bank of challenges readily available for any children who do whiz through all the activities and then need something extra to push them even further. So for all the mastery approach, kind of at first glance might sound like, oh, are we holding any children back? Are we supporting everybody enough? But that does come with some adaptations to ensure that we are providing all the children with everything that they need. Now on the next slide, I just wanted to mention how we start each of our lessons. So every single one of our maths lessons begins with what we call Flashback 4. Now, why it's called Flashback 4, I don't know, because as you can see on there, there's a sneaky clock in the corner. Every single year group has 5 questions on their slide, not 4. So it's actually kind of a Flashback 5, really. Now, when we do Flashback, this is at the start of every single lesson. We start with this. And the 5 questions, that are given are very strategically chosen. These aren't questions that we have designed, they are designed by White Rose Maths, which is the scheme that we use. And they're designed very, very carefully in that number 1 will be a recap of something they did in the last lesson. Number 2 will be a recap of something they did kind of a few lessons ago. Number 3 will be a recap of something they did in a previous topic. And number 4 will be a recap of something they did in a previous year group. So you are really consolidating and keeping revising work that the children have done previously to really keep it fresh in their minds and stop them forgetting, essentially. The last question that's in the corner is always on kind of a similar theme. So this half term, year 3 are doing time. I think year 4 are doing time, aren't they, Mrs. Ray?
We're coming on to it, yeah.
Coming on to time, whereas I've seen kind of year 5 had Roman numerals for a while, something that all the children can find tricky. So it's always got more of a prolonged period of time on that 5th question, because obviously recapping time isn't something that you can just do in one lesson and master. You need several lessons. So we have time for the full topic for us to recap that. One of the brilliant things about doing this is it's just keeping everything fresh in the children's minds. And they do it with confidence as well, which is brilliant. And it keeps reminding them of the different methods that they can use. So the reason that we do Flashback, one, I've just said it's brilliant for keeping those different mathematical concepts fresh in their minds. But actually on the screen now you have a graph that shows the breakdown of questions from the last few years' SATs papers. Now I realise that SATs have been different for the last few years. So this is actually the 2016 to 2019 SATs papers. But you can see in the different colours there that the blue questions are questions that come from the year 3 and 4 curriculum. So that means that the children in year 6 are sitting a test that has almost, well, just short of a third of the marks are from the year 3 and 4 curriculum. And I think that it's quite a common thing to kind of put a lot of onus onto year 6. And actually, when you sit down and break it down, there's a lot of learning that has to be done in year 3 and 4 and 5 that then leads into those year 6 SATs. And it's probably terrifying you talking about your children doing year 6 SATs right now, but we are all building towards that bigger picture at the end of primary school. One of the most interesting questions I've seen in a SATs test is this one here. So this was a few years ago. This was when I was in year 6, so 4 years ago. How many days are there in September, October and November altogether? This is something that we only learn in year 3 on the curriculum. And this is why it's so important that we keep recapping different topics from different year groups. Because if you looked at solely the curriculum, the children won't be expected to learn how many days there are in months. Whereas if you keep recapping these concepts, then it keeps it fresh in the head. I mean, I have to think about the answer to that. I'll be counting on my knuckles. And it's important that we do recap those things. Otherwise, they're going to get to year 6 or even life like me. I don't know how many days are in the months without doing a little trick counting my knuckles. So it is important that we do keep revising these concepts through things such as Flashback to ensure that they are equipped for questions like this.
Okay, so moving on to the layout of how the White Rose looks. So I know you'll probably be really familiar with this because these are what's uploaded on the website at the moment for home learning. Obviously, when the children were at home learning, you will have had access to these as well. Just to explain how they're sort of laid out. So they start out with what some might refer to as the easier skills, but this is the fluency. So you can see that the fluency question starts off at the beginning, and you've got a differentiation there of kind of concrete and also manipulatives as well that you can see on there. So you can have the pictorial representations with the thousands, hundreds, tens and ones chart. And then the children will, get if they need to, they'll get the place value counters out while we're looking through those questions and use those to assist themselves as well. That's where also the differentiation comes in that Mrs. Robertshaw mentioned. So there will be some children who will rely on those throughout the lesson, and that's absolutely fine, and that's what they need to be able to support them in their learning. Some children will feel more confident and be able to access without, and again, it is just complete preference. As long as they get there in the end with the answer, then that's what we're looking for. Then as we move on to the second sheet that you can see there, you can see more sort of problem solving and reasoning questions, which is where they deepen their understanding of the fluency that's been taught earlier on the sheet. And like Mrs. Robertshaw said, it's quite common that, sometimes half the class won't move on to the back end of the sheet if they're working at their own pace. So it might be then that we need to intervene and say, right, we're all going to try the problem solving one together. One thing that we do as well, which the children love, is at the end of the lesson, we go through the answers together. And I think that's really important because sometimes, and I know when I was at school, you go back to your book and you've got it marked, but you can't even remember what the questions were because you've slept since then. Whereas the children, I think, really like marking their own work and seeing what mistakes they've made. And it's fresh in the minds then to be able to say, oh yeah, I've just made that one mistake there. And then later on in the day, we can pick up on post-teach if some children have really struggled and be able to offer that support as and when. Because the thing with White Rose as well is obviously with everyone moving at the same pace, you don't want children to fall behind if they have not got a concept, if we're moving on. So we do pre-teach and post-teach interventions for children who may struggle, and that can completely be different children every lesson depending on what the topic is that we're learning. And then, as Mrs. Robertshaw said, if there's children who finish all of the White Rose that we're looking at, there are some challenges that they can independently access, which are on our maths working wall. And again, they can just bring those to the table and work on those independently. And they are they've got on the back sort of what topic they are. So they're either taught topics, so again, revisiting previous topics that they've learned, or they'll be the current topic. So it might be a bit more of a challenge because it could be something that we've not quite covered, which they're really pushing themselves to see if they can work out with what they already know. So we've talked about a lot about White Rose. Moving on now to mental maths. So on our, it's worked out on a Monday now because it's when we have singing in school in the morning. The second half of that what would be a lesson is we're now taking up with mental maths and arithmetic. And as you can see, the stat here, 63% of Year 6 arithmetic stats papers could be answered just using mental strategies. So you can see how massively important it is that children have these mental maths methods and they're able to use them quicker than using written methods. I do find in mine a lot, you know, they love column addition and they rely on that a lot, but sometimes, you know, I'm trying to get them to see you don't need to do column addition. It's a lot faster to use your mental maths. So we have this practice every Monday, and you'll have seen them, and we're going to show you them on the next few slides, but you'll probably see that slip of paper that comes home to let you know what we're learning that week. The way it works in Year 4, and I think it's quite similar in other classes, is 1 week we look at mental maths and a mental math strategy, and then the next week we'll look at an arithmetic paper and do an arithmetic paper, which is where they're applying these mental maths methods in practice. And again, if we just have a look at the next slide, that just highlights there that it's not necessarily about children finding the easiest way for them to solve a problem. It's basically them looking at the question and thinking, what's the best method that I can use here? And some examples there that we've got in Year 4 that we've been using is like rounding up or partitioning, you know, partitioning a number if they're adding two-digit numbers together, partitioning them into tens and ones before and then adding them together. Whereas again, like I say, some children will sit and they'll try and do the column addition, but it's actually quicker to partition in your head, especially if you're not having to cross over. And it's just getting them familiar with that and being able to quickly do that without being prompted, because like we say, when it comes to the Year 6 stats, they'll save a lot more time for the other questions that do require a bit more time if they can answer these mental maths questions quicker.
So we thought we'd just take a little bit of time looking at the types of things we practice and learn about in mental maths. So as a school, we have a progression document that breaks down mental maths objectives and rapid recall objectives, which you can see on the board, on screen, sorry, teacher mode still. So we break down all of the different objectives into different year groups, kind of matched to curriculum expectations. Now that progression document is actually available on the maths page on the website if you were wanting to do any work with it at home. And like Mrs. Ray said, we pick one objective that we cover over a 2-week period. So for example, I might look at this and go, right, my children really need work on doubles and halves of multiples from 10, multiples of 10 up to 100. That's the mental maths objective we're going to concentrate on for the next 2 weeks. We'll have a mental maths session working on that on a Monday morning, and you should also receive a slip of paper home with that mental maths objective and another thing I'll show you in a moment to support your children in practicing at home if they are wanting to practice at home. And that is in preparation for what we'd kind of call a mini test, similar to like the spelling test that we do weekly. So the children could do a bit of practice at home, we do a bit of practice at school, we teach them the strategy, practice using the strategy, and then have a little mini test to see how they've got on with that. So I put all these on here as well in case you were wanting to access them via the recording that we'll put on the website afterwards and that gets sent out. The slides will also be on the Year 3 and 4 website pages if you did want to come back and access them again, or you can just go onto the full document that's on the maths page. So these are the Year 3 rapid recall objectives. So Year 3 are really plugging the 3, 4 and 8 times table at the moment. We're doing songs, we're doing loads of times table rock stars. I get my children once a week, we do like a times table task as well. We're really trying to prepare them, because the better they know their times tables, the easier the classwork is. And as Mrs. Ray said at the beginning as well, Year 4 do actually have a times table check later on in the year. So the better prepared in the previous year groups they are, the less challenging that is when the children get to year 4, because it is a pretty tricky test. It's fast paced, there's a lot of questions. Mrs. Ray is going to go through that, so you'll see eventually why it's so important that we're really getting the children solid in those times tables. But like I say, the better the times tables, the easier it is in class for them. So we're on the 3s, 4s and 8s. If the children are ready, I'll move them on even further. We just need to make sure we've really consolidated those first. So we've got a few objectives there. We also have a load of objectives that have now appeared in front of you as well. Now, it does seem like a lot of objectives, but this is for the full year. So this is what the children need to have mastered by the end of year 3. We also do have a look back at previous year group objectives, particularly with COVID and with the working from home, and the fact that we actually only introduced mental maths in this way kind of at the back end of last year. There could well be gaps in the children's knowledge, so we need to make sure we identify those and work towards those gaps as well. So you've seen the year 3 ones, these are the year 4 ones. Now you can see that we go from in year 3 having to know 3s, 4s and 8s to suddenly in year 4 having to know all of them up to 12 times 12, which is a huge jump. And that's why I say the better they know them, the easier it is for class and for year 4 times table check. And if the children are ready in year 3, I do intend, and I know Miss Hughes will do the same when she steps in, on trying to get them to learn as many as she possibly can do. So we've got some further year 4 objectives there. Now, when we give an objective, you should have something similar to this coming home with you. And when I say should, I think the teachers have kind of, they're remembering to send them out now. At first, I think we all forgot every so often. So if you are noticing that your child isn't bringing a mental maths slip home every 2 weeks, please just prompt them to look in the reading folder or just check in the bag. You might have left it on the desk. If you would like to work with them on it at home, please do just mention it to them if you've not noticed one for a while. This little slip that you get will just support them and you in seeing the methods that we encourage in school, because I realise that methods just change continuously, and the method you might use might not be the same method that we currently teach in school. So it's just useful for you as well to see how we're teaching the children the method. So this is a year 3 objective, multiplying any 2-digit number by 10. And we do that through using place value and the place value grid. We don't do the whole add a 0, because then that confuses them when we get onto decimals later in school. So this is the method we teach. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, we would then give the children a mini test, which looks like this. We'd get the children to mark their own, and then all the teachers have a good overview of if there's somebody who hasn't been as successful in that objective, then we know that they do need some post-teaching to support them in achieving it. So before we finish, we thought we'd just look at the things that you could possibly do at home to support your children. Now, I think the most important thing on there for me at the moment really is that times tables, because like I mentioned, anything you can do at home to support them will then make life easier in class. And when they do get to year 4 in that times table check, it just makes them more confident in that area as well. We spend a lot of time in year 3 on the 4 operations, so addition, subtraction, multiplication and division. Now, addition, subtraction and multiplication, we've already spent a lot of time on, and that's using the column method. And division, we're just on with at the moment, and we're about to introduce the bus stop method, but we've been using concrete materials so far. If you wanted to support them with any of those things, that's what, well, if you want to support them with anything, that's the direction I point them into, as well as place value. So knowing if you have a 3-digit number, knowing there's this many hundreds, this many tens, this many ones, and being able to identify the value of each digit. It's really surprising some of the children that are absolute whizzes at times tables, addition, subtraction, and then you give them a 3-digit number and you say how many hundreds, and the face goes blank. And they do know, really. It's just a case of kind of making it more obvious to them and supporting them with that. But place value goes up to the millions as they go higher up school. So the more we can do now, the more useful that is. And it also supports them in just so many of the concepts that we do in class. So they're my asks if you would like to support your children at all at home.
Yeah, my big plea as well is the Timetable Rockstars. The Timetable Rockstars, the format that we use with Timetable Rockstars when they do a sound check is very, very similar to what the multiplication check will be like. So the most practice they can get on that, the better they're going to be and the quicker they're going to be, because they are going to be doing the test on iPads. So, you know, they need to be able to be quick to answer the questions. And I find sometimes that can be what's the barrier with them, you know, because they're not quick enough kind of using the keypad. The other thing with me, as well as the 4 operations, and again, we use the column method. I'm just taking for granted that you know what the column method is. But to give you an example, you know, it's where you've got, I'm just doing a quick little diagram so I can show you on the screen, but that's the column method. So where we've got where you'd work on your, you always work on the ones first, and then you move across to the tens, and then obviously if it's a 3-digit number, you'd work on your hundreds. And we've already covered carrying over as well. And I think if you were going to support your children with that, it's making sure that they actually are physically carrying over. Similarly, we've just looked at division, and when they're carrying over with the bus stop method with division, again, it's making sure that they actually are writing that number that they've carried over, because you'll find that some children don't and they can remember it, but that's where they can make the mistakes as well. And decimals, I'm not sure, I don't think they cover them in year 3. They do seem very new to them in year 4, and they do seem to struggle with them a little bit. And I think for decimals, it really is that practice of, you know, taking the decimal out at first so they can see that you are just adding it as you would a normal number, or taking away as you would a normal number, but making sure that you add the decimal back in just for them to get familiar with that. Fractions, we're about to move on to fractions, but I think one thing that's really come through just when they've done like little assessments or end of term assessments, when they might throw a question in that they've not quite been exposed to or not necessarily remembering from previous year groups, it's seeing it a bit more abstract. So, you know, not just seeing a circle cut into 4 and 1/4 shaded. It might be where, a bit like the question that we had on the slides at the beginning of the PowerPoint, where it's an abstract shape and there's you know, separate parts of the shape are coloured in, and they've got to work out the fraction from that. But as I say, once we move on to fractions, we should start to sort of embed the learning and be able to come back on prior learning with that. But the big ask for me is definitely the Timetable Rockstars, and making sure it's regular as well, because you might think that they're confident with it now, but if they haven't been on for a few weeks, it really does show. So just making sure that that's embedded just as much as reading is at home if possible.
So I think, well, I'm just going to stop sharing there for a second, just so we can see if anybody turns their camera back on. You've got no obligation to turn your camera on right now. So we are going to move on in a moment to Mrs. Ray telling us all about the multiplication check that the children do in year 4. We just thought we'd give you an opportunity. Does anyone want to ask any questions about what we've gone through already? If we just see cameras off and mute, then I'm going to take that as a no, you're happy for us to move on. We've got a thumbs up from this. Okay, so thank you for the thumbs up. Now, if there is anybody who wants from year 3 that wants to leave at this point, you are more than welcome to leave. The bit we're going through now, the multiplication check, is for year 4. However, the year 3 children will be moving into year 4 next year, so you can make the choice as to whether you stay and listen to that or not. If you do choose to leave, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate you coming just to kind of learn a bit more about what the children do and how you can support them. If you do have any questions you'd rather ask us in the flesh, please feel free to grab us in the playground at any point, or call school or drop an email to the office. But otherwise, I think, Mrs. Ray, should we get moving on and I'll go back to the screen share?
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Thank you.
Right, let me just, hold on, I've got, all right. Can you see that, Mrs. Ray?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, there you
are. Okay, so moving on to the multiplication tables check. So it's just MTC is how it's referred to in a lot of publications, if you see anything about it. So it is compulsory, and we've got 3 weeks to complete it, starting on Monday, the 6th of June. And it's covering all 12 timetables basically. So we have looked at all 12 timetables now, and we're regularly practicing all 12 timetables. I've started to timetable it in as a separate session each week, but even every day I'm getting children on timetable rockstars as much as possible. And like I said, that just really needs to continue at home to give them the best possible chance that they've got. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a background about the multiplication check. So it's all primary school children are expected by the end of year 6 to be able to know all of the times tables up to 12 times 12. Under the national curriculum currently, children are supposed to know the times tables by the end of year 4, but until recently they haven't actually had to be checked on them in year 4, and it would just kind of show through from the year 6 SAT. So they decided that in order to be able to implement from year 4 to year 6 any children that might need that additional support, they would include this multiplication tables check. So again, it kind of goes back to mastering numeracy, and this is what the DFE have said, that it's giving children the skills and knowledge they need for secondary school, and it's to determine whether they can recall the multiplication tables fluently. So when I'm doing it in class with the children, I can still see quite a few of them, you know, they're using the fingers to work their way through the tables, and that's not going to work for the test. They really need to just know the tables. And that is what the test is designed to do. That's why they get 6 seconds to answer each question, and it is that fluency that we're looking for. It's not that you can get there in the end. It is that you've got that quick recall of the answer. The reason why it's also being implemented is because, as always, there's a raise in standards, and so we've got to have an assessment system in place to be able to support this. That constantly sort of raising standards with children, and in recent years it's just been decided that, like I said, there was this gap where there was a big jump from year 4 to year 6 where it wasn't really getting monitored, and with year 4 being on the year 4 curriculum, that they should know all of the tables, it really should get checked in year 4 so that we can support them then moving forward into year 5 so that they're well prepared for the year 6 SATs. So a little bit more about what the actual test will look like. So as I've mentioned, there's 6 seconds to answer each question. There'll be 25 questions. They range from the 2 to the 12 times tables, and there is a big focus on the 6, 7s, 8s and 9s because they do seem to be the trickier ones, and I've noticed that as well. When we're doing it in class, they are really the ones where people are getting caught up with. So we're doing as much practice, especially around those ones. And I have actually set those on Garage for my class, just to really embed that knowledge with them so that they're not doing, because the actual sound check does have a variety, and obviously it's got all of the others, but they really need that focus on the 6, 7s, 8s and 9s at the moment. Each question will appear only once. So you'll also won't have reversals of the question. So for example, if there's 3 times 4, there won't be 4 times 3, because obviously that's the same answer. So there's 25 questions, and there'll be a 3-second pause in between each question before they move on to the next question. The children are given plenty of practice with timetable rockstars. So like I've mentioned, the sound check on the timetable rockstars is pretty much identical to what this test will look like. So they'll be very familiar with it, and hopefully it won't feel too much of a test for them. They know they've got it. I've spoken to them about it, but I haven't said it as much as a test. And like I said, the more practice that we do with the timetable rockstars on the iPads, which is what they'll be using for it, it should just feel like another day doing a sound check basically for them. There's no pass mark, so no child will fail the test. The DFE says that the purpose of the check is, like I've said, to help us identify the children that may be falling behind, or if there's a target area that we need to support them with moving forward into year 6. Having said that, we won't give the children the results, but parents and carers will be able to know what score they got. And the school level results won't be made publicly available or used in league tables or anything like that. So it really is for teacher assessment, really, and for us to be able to support children as best that they can moving forward, and making sure that they're really confident with the multiplication questions. Like Mrs. Robertshaw's already said, the better they are at this, it gives them such a better chance with the year 6 SATs, because once they know their times tables confidently, those 4 operations just become a lot easier for them. And they're able to apply it so much more to other areas of the maths. So yeah, like I said, it's going to start from June. We're really embedding it now in class. We're doing it every day, timetable rock stars, and as much as you can support at home would be amazing. But I don't want you to worry about it. Like I said, there isn't a pass mark or a fail mark. It is, you know, teacher assessment. It is for me to be able to support the children, and I can already see now, you know, I can see from the sound check results that children are really making progress, and I can see that, especially over sort of Christmas and things coming back after Christmas, they really are starting to go on a lot more and be able to answer quicker and feel more confident, which is great. So just between now and June, it's just about keeping that up really, and making sure once it clicks with them and once they learn these facts, they've learnt them then. So hopefully there shouldn't be any regression after they've, you know, clicked, and make sure that they know the answers. But yeah, if there's any questions, feel free to ask, but that's mainly it really.
I've just come off sharing. If you do have any questions about the times table check, feel free to turn your camera on, unmute yourselves. Is there anyone who wants to ask a question? Or is there anybody who's come up with a question for any of what we've said throughout the whole session?
Can I ask a really maybe stupid question about the times table test? So if it's laid out like the sound check on times tables rock stars, on the bit where you input the actual numbers, you can invert that, so you either have 7, 8, 9 or 1, 2, 3 at the top. Do you know on the actual test which numbers are at the top, so that it's not like the wrong way round from what they've been practicing?
Do you know off the top of your head, Mrs. Ray?
No, I don't. I think, do you mean like, I'll see what you mean. No,
like,
I don't know.
On your keyboard, the order that they appear. Have you any idea what order they appear?
No, I don't.
That's something that we can find out easily though.
Yeah.
I think because it's Mrs. Ray's first year doing it, I think if we asked Mrs. Byrne, who did it last year, I think she'd probably be able to answer us in a split second. But it's something I've never stopped to think about. It's a very good point that we'd hope that it would mirror times table rock stars.
Yeah.
That's something we do just need to check. If you want to just make a note of that, Mrs. Ray.
Yeah, will do. That's fine.
Thank you.
I'll get back to you about that.
Any more questions from anybody else? Okay, right. So thank you very much for joining us. We really do appreciate your support. You know, you are here because you want to support your children, and we are very thankful for that. If you do come up with any questions when you go away this evening and you reflect on it, then please just feel free to ask me or Mrs. Ray at a convenient time for you. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.